Good morning. Let's start by singing together.
Good morning and welcome to First Unitarian Portland, whether you're here in our sanctuary or here via live stream. We are a multi-generational community where you are invited to grow in spirit, and we are invited to grow our collective capacity to build the beloved community. I have a few important announcements to share. Here are some of our upcoming holiday services and activities. There are 2 more Monday morning Lenten Matin services at 8 a.m. on Zoom before Easter. We will hold a Good Friday Tenebrae service in Elliott Chapel on Friday, March 29th at 7 p.m., and our multi-generational Easter service and egg hunt will begin on Sunday, March 31st at 10:30. And next month, we'll be hosting a Passover Seder and meal following the service on April 21st. But you're going to want to look soon this week to RSVP in our Front Steps newsletter. We are very excited for a full day here in our church. Join us after the service for an all-church democracy fair. We'll gather in the Buchanan Reception Hall for our social hour with light food. Our social justice groups have information, and at 12:15 we'll move into our program with song and workshop introductions. At 12:35 and 1:40, you can choose among workshop sessions led by community leaders and organizing partners from Planned Parenthood, the Sacred Organizing Interfaith Network for Housing and Climate Justice, a fellow UU and community engagement director for an Oregon legislator, as well as an education session led by congregants. We'll sing our way out by 3 o'clock, and we hope you'll join us in deepening our connections to one another and learning essential skills to strengthen our democracy at this critical time. If I was on Facebook, @this critical, all caps, time, period. Once again, welcome, everyone. And now let's take a moment to greet our neighbors warmly. Welcome, welcome. I invite you to continue that level of warmth following the service. A special note to those who might be visiting for the first time, don't forget to join in our welcome circle, which will meet right over here following the service. And we would love to greet you warmly and share about our congregation. I would like to invite Evie and Sharon and our entire K1 class to come forward. They're going to help us light the chalice, share a special announcement, and offer a special element. If you're joining us from home, I invite you to light a candle or chalice alongside of us. We are Unitarian Universalists. We light this chalice in faith, in hope, and in love. I see you're all wearing green today. Is that because we're so excited that it's Happy St. Patrick's Day? Or is there a second reason we're super excited?
So many reasons. I think we're going to light our chalice from our class. We have a special chalice lighting in kindergarten, so our kindergarten children thought we would teach you ours. We do it in sign language, so you'll be able to help and just follow our movement. Okay, are we ready? If you can get your, here we go. Let us light a chalice of understanding in our hearts, so we may know how other people think and feel. Excellent. Thank you so much.
We are very flexible.
They are very flexible.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
It's green hats and feathers time again. So if you're new to our congregation, that means our auction is coming. As you can see, Sharon is wearing her matching green shirt for the auction and for St. Patrick's Day.
And Dana has one just like it.
You're on next.
This year's auction, we're calling Creating Connections, Zap the Gap 2, because it's our second, the 2 is TOO, because it's our second online auction, and the money will again go to meet the church budget. The auction went so well last year that we wanted to offer again events where you can meet and greet and mingle with other congregants, and services that make us all so happy. So it's events and services that we're soliciting today.
But before we talk about this year's auction, we want to give special thanks to all the people who made our last year's auction so successful. Last year we had a goal of $40,000. We weren't quite sure if we were going to be able to make it. It was our first year back after COVID. But with your generosity and help, we hit over $49,000. That is so amazing.
We want to recognize those people and people who made us so successful last year. So please stand when we call your name and remain standing. And we'd like you to hold your applause, wild applause, until the very end, please. Okay.
First, we want to thank Bill Cunningham, and he'll stand right now, whose computer expertise and patience, especially with Sharon and I, made this auction possible. And we also would like to have the auction committee. So if you were on the auction committee, could you please stand? Bill is still standing. Oh, thank you.
Good job.
Thank you.
Okay. The sextants are here, some up there, but they're all over the church taking really good care of us all the time, and we want to thank them especially. Now, if you were a donor last year, would you please stand and keep standing?
Oh, look at all of this. Yay. If you were someone who sponsored, will you please stand? If you were a bidder, especially if you were a winning bidder, will you please stand?
We would like to thank the ministers and the staff. They're already standing. Oh, good. All right, Jerome. That's right. And how about those fantastic pie makers from the Alliance? All right.
We want to thank everyone who registered to participate last year. But now, and not least, we want everybody to think about, are you planning to donate something this year? Or maybe are you planning to come this year to our auction? Can you please stand? Oh, I'm sure it's going to be everybody. Of course you're going to bid and donate.
All right.
See, it takes a village, a whole church village, to make this auction successful again this year.
All right, now let's have a big cheer for everybody. Thank you.
The auction committee will be downstairs, not this week, but the following 3 weeks in Fuller Hall to help you register for the auction and to help with donations. But we are accepting donations now online until April 8th. And the bidding, the first day of the auction will be April 21st. The auction ends Sunday, May 5th with a big celebration in the Buchanan Reception Hall. Watch for important dates and deadlines in front steps. So let's zap the gap. Two.
And now we're preparing for a Oscar-worthy presentation by the kindergarteners and first graders of First Unitarian Church.
Give us a Z.
Z.
Give us an A. Give us a P.
Give us a P.
Give us a love.
Words of Anne Hillman. We are all on a journey together to the center of the universe. Look deep into yourself, into another. It is to a center which is everywhere. That is the holy journey. First, you need only look. Notice and honor the radiance of everything about you. Play in this universe. Tend all these shining things around you. The smallest plant, the creatures and objects in your care. Be gentle and nurture. Listen. As we experience and accept all that we really are, we grow in care. We begin to embrace others as ourselves and learn to live as one among many. It is good to be together as we gather for worship this morning. Let us join in singing now, Light of Ages and of Nations. Will you rise in body and in spirit? Please remain standing for our responsive reading by Joy Harjo. Remember the earth whose skin you are, red earth, black earth, yellow earth, white earth, brown earth. We are earth. Remember the plants, trees, animal life, who all have their tribes, their families, their histories too. Talk to them, listen to them. They are alive poems. Remember the wind, remember her voice. She knows the origin of the universe. Remember, you are all people, and all people are you. We are earth. Remember, you are the universe, and this universe is you. We are earth. Remember, all is in motion, is growing, is you. We are earth. Remember, language comes from this. Remember, the dance language is, that life is. Remember, we are earth. Let's join now in our doxology, Spirit of Life.
story today is one of my family's favorite books. It's about finding that right balance so that we can participate in community, in the whole, in being a part of the collective, and yet still show up as whoever we truly are. Let's see how the main character, Jameson, handles this in Green Pants, written and illustrated by Kenneth Kragle. Jameson only ever wore green pants. When he wore green pants, he could do anything. He could dunk. He could dive. And he could dance. Sometimes people tried to get Jameson to wear pants of a different color. But one way or another, Jameson made sure they didn't end up in his closet. One day, Jameson's cousin Armando came by with his fiancée, Jo. Jo had the nicest smile Jameson had ever seen, and her eyes seemed to sparkle like the spring sun shining upon a running river. "Hey, Jameson, we have a question for you," Armando said. "Would you like to be in our wedding?" Jo asked. "Absolutely," Jameson replied, staring deeply into Jo's bright eyes. The next morning, Jameson's mother said, "You know, being in a wedding is a big deal. You'll have to wear a tuxedo." "Okay," Jameson nodded, "no problem." "Jameson, the tuxedo will be," what color do you think the tuxedo has to be? That's what his mom said. "What?" Jameson gasped. "Black pants? Black? Are you sure?" At the tuxedo fitting, Jameson rejected every pair of black pants he was given to try. But he was quite impressed with how striking his green pants looked with the rest of the tuxedo. His mother, however, remained firm. "If you want to be in the wedding, you'll have to wear black pants." The day of the wedding came, and Jameson still hadn't made up his mind. "I'm sorry you have to choose," his mom said, "but I'm afraid you must." "But how?" Jameson cried. "It's impossible." All too soon, it was time. "It is a tough decision, but I know you can figure it out." Mom kissed his forehead and went inside. Jameson sank in despair. "But how do I make such a decision?" Just then, Jo appeared. Her hair played happily in the sunny breeze. Her eyes shone like summer stars, and her smile warmed his very soul. "Hey, Jameson, I'm so glad you're here. I'll see you inside." And as quickly as she'd appeared, she was gone. Her soft, sweet voice lingered in the air, and in that moment, Jameson's choice became clear. The wedding began, and Jameson appeared, right on cue, looking quite dashing in his tuxedo. During the ceremony, Jameson stood very still. Afterward, he posed for every picture with perfect charm and grace. At dinner, he was pleasant and courteous. His manners were impeccable. But the moment the dance music began, a pair of black pants fell to the floor, and Jameson danced like no one has ever danced. The end. So it is time for our children, youth, and religious educators to make our way next door. And I have some instructions for our kindergarten and first grade superstars, okay? If you're new here, please meet us in the lobby. We'll escort you. I would like the kindergarten and first grade class to come up and to take the Learning Community Chalice and to lead us in a parade over to the other side of the building, okay? Please join in our song of blessing now. Our plate share for the month of March goes to the Levin Community Land and Housing Coalition, which is an interfaith collective that grows neighborhood capacity to stabilize our communities so that all people in Oregon may find a home. They are one of our core partners for organizing people, power, and money around issues of housing equity and immigration and racial justice in the surrounding community. If you'd like to donate via check or cash, our ushers will be coming around in just a moment. If you'd like to give electronically, you can find the QR code on the screen and also on the yellow slips of paper in one of the racks in front of you. And if you're on Boxcast, you can just click the Donate Now button. Thank you for your generosity. It makes a difference to our wider community.
We invite you into this time of prayer and intention. For those who are in the room, you are invited at any time to go to either of our galleries and to light a candle, and you can write down a prayer on a slip of paper. Online, you can send an intention to prayer at firstunitarianportland.org. We share aloud some of the milestones that we receive during the week, and we have 4 to share this morning. The first, member Nancy Bragdon died on February 26th at the age of 95. Nancy was involved in many civic groups in the city, along with her husband, Paul. We hold her family at this time of loss and affirm their legacy of making a difference. Member Michael Spurlock died on March 3rd at the age of 78. Michael and his wife Jackie joined the church in 2020. Besides Jackie, he leaves 2 sons, their spouses, and 4 grandchildren. A celebration of life is planned for Michael later in the spring. We hold his family and affirm his legacy of love made a difference. Member Stan Jewett has been in intensive care at Kaiser Westside Hospital this week with an infection that led to septic shock. Stan is getting better thanks to antibiotics, and it seems that his condition is becoming more stable. Let us all hold Stan in prayers and meditations for healing and for his continued recovery. Priscilla Grice, mother of member Julie Grice, took a bad fall just last night and sustained a head injury. She is in ICU at OHSU Hospital. We hold Julie, we hold her mother and their whole family in our hearts for healing. May they feel surrounded by our love at this time. I invite you into a continued moment of prayer and meditation. Spirit of life, we know we are each here for but a brief time against the vastness of the cosmos and the sweep of history. Yet we affirm each of our finite lives are precious and holy. Each of us has within the capacity to flourish and flower. After a cold, barren winter, the kiss of the sunshine on our cheek this weekend reminds us there is always something else around the corner. Each of us has within the capacity for resilience and resistance. After every wave of disinformation and every attempt to diminish our democracy, we can rise and join the collective communion of struggle to birth a truly inclusive America, the one on the horizon, calling to us as partners of a new dawn. Each of us has within the capacity for compassion and creativity. Today we mark the anniversary of 4 years ago when we first went online to protect our communities from a global pandemic. After a time apart and a time of navigating uncertainty and loss, we learn that we have the stuff it takes to reinvent, to renew, and to renovate what has fallen into disrepair. For no matter what, we affirm we are a part of and never apart from the beloved community. We rise and fall, and having fallen, rise again together, this time with more resolve and more knowledge of just how precious every person is. Everyone who we may have taken for granted, every relationship with loved ones, friends, acquaintances, strangers, and even foes, for any one of us, might not be here tomorrow. And yet, all of us in our physical and virtual sanctuary are here today, and so we pray. We spend the richness of our days on relationships that yield collective well-being, courageous and loving actions, and cultivating a joy that ripples out. May that be our legacy. Amen, and blessed be, and may it be so. And now I invite you into a moment of silence together. Our reading is Candles by Carl Dennis. If on your grandmother's birthday you burn a candle to honor her memory, you might think of burning an extra to honor the memory of someone who never met her. A man who may have come to the town she lived in looking for work and never found it. Picture him taking a stroll one morning after a month of grief with the want ads to refresh himself in the park before moving on. Suppose he notices on the gravel path the shards of a green glass bottle that your grandmother, still a girl, will be destined to step on when she wanders barefoot away from her school picnic, if he doesn't stoop down and scoop the mess up with the want ad section and carry it to a trash can. For you to burn a candle for him, you needn't suppose the cut would be a deep one, just deep enough to keep her at home the night of the hayride when she meets Helen, who is soon to become her dearest friend, whose brother George 30 years later helps your grandfather with a loan so his shoe store doesn't go under in the Great Depression, and his son, your father, is able to stay in school where his love of learning is fanned into flames, a love he labors later to kindle in you. How grateful you are for your father's efforts is shown by the candles you've burned for him. But today, for a change, Why not a candle for the man whose name is unknown to you? Take a moment to wonder whether he died at home, with friends and family, or alone on the road, on the lookout for no one to sit at his bedside and hold his hand, the very hand it's time for you to imagine holding.
As Reverend Allison mentioned earlier, it was 4 years ago this week when the world was shutting down in light of the advancing COVID pandemic. One Sunday we were in church, as we had always been for as long as we could remember. The next Sunday we were virtual only. One day schools were in person. All of a sudden it was all online. People who had jobs that allowed them to work virtually did so. Others learned that they had jobs that required them to show up as always, putting themselves in danger. Groups that made up the fabric of our lives all of a sudden were no longer meeting in person. It was a lot of change in a very short time. So what do you remember from those days? I remember the sense of fear, the sense of uncertainty. I remember us asking how it was we were going to do church given this new reality. I remember how we ran pieces in the church newsletter on how to bring home and unpack your groceries. Tape off a section of counter space and place your bag there. Take the things out from one bag and wipe each thing down carefully, then put them in the clean section on your counter. Now, I'm still not sure why we ran that in the church newsletter. It was the kind of information where we were receiving in all kinds of places. But somehow, perhaps it felt like something we could just do something about. One thing we could maybe control, I guess, how we handled our groceries. There were so many things like that. We just pretty much didn't know what to do or think. This felt like we were in some wholly new territory. But who could have imagined just how long it would go on? In those early years of March of 2020, we couldn't imagine how it would go on for more than a week or two. Those weeks quickly passed. Surely we'll be back in church by Easter. Easter came and went, virtually. Certainly by summer. Now, by summer, we were making plans for a whole nother church year that would be online. That was something we came to accept. Variants of various strength and length came and went. Vaccines came, and at least part of life slowly seemed to return to some kind of normal. Throughout this time, there was a kind of paradox of both coming together and also being more and more isolated. Both of those things happening side by side. Some could not wait for it to return. Others found the isolation actually okay. That was something they seemed to settle into for some longer term. Looking back, how is it that we tell that story now? For starters, in my life, I know when I'm trying to remember when something happened, I first go to whether it was before, during, or after that pandemic. And with the passage of time, the details and sequencing of those details gets a little more fuzzy. Perhaps that's a sign that life does continue return to at least some kind of normal. Of course, the question still is just what is that new normal we are in? Times of disruption have a way of being some of those defining moments in life. Where were you when? Name that event. Of course, it depends on our age when we were living for those events. There are moments when the world seems to stop in its tracks, at least for a moment. At least it takes a pause. And maybe times when we're jostled out of some of what is most familiar. They are times when we may recall not only where we were as individuals, but also how we were together through this time. Would the murder of George Floyd have registered so universally were it not for it happening in the midst of that pandemic? It was captured on video, yes, but there was also something about it happening when most all of us had been taken out of our usual routines. It can be so easy to not really register big, horrible things like that sometimes. But there was something about those days that allowed the depth of that story to register so much more broadly. We each have our own versions of that time and the stories that came out of those days. But there's something that happens, at least for a time, when we do seem to come together and tell something closer to some shared story. And as it happens in our times, that only seems to last for just a little while. It seems as if those old divisions so quickly return, whether it be masks or vaccinations. But I'm struck just by how quickly the old divisions come to rear their heads, no matter what the specifics of that. We seem to so quickly find our way back to our corners. Life moves forward, but then it doesn't. There are, of course, many things that contribute to the divides among us, divides between left and right, between urban and rural. We get isolated from others, and we all too quickly come to see the others as simply that, the others. That seems to be one of the constants, too, no matter what the particular issue of the day might be. A through line seems to be that we come to focus on what is best for us as individuals and not so much on what is the common good. The French philosopher Alexis de Tocqueville came to America not long after our country's founding in the early 1800s, and he seemed to be able, almost like nobody else, to clearly define something in the American character. In particular, he noted an ideal of individualism that was central in seeming to define who it was we were. For de Tocqueville, that was both a blessing and perhaps our country's curse. These are his words. Individualism is a calm and considered feeling which disposes each citizen to isolate himself from the mass of his fellows and withdraw into the circle of family and friends. With this little society formed to his taste, he gladly leaves the greater society to look after itself. As democratic individualism grows, there are more and more people who, though neither rich nor powerful enough to have much hold over others, have gained or kept enough wealth and enough understanding to look after their own needs. Such folk owe no man anything and hardly expect anything from anybody. They form the habit of thinking of themselves in isolation and imagine that their whole destiny is in their hands. Those words were written a long time ago, and yet I'm struck by how they still seem to resonate today. How often is it that we find ourselves in isolation when it comes to others and have some shared vision of some common good? Think about those words in the context of someone in our society needing help. We know who they might be: the poor, the woman seeking reproductive care, maybe a trans youth somewhere. Bottom line, it's up to you to make it on your own. Now, the American dream tells us that each one of us can have whatever it is we want. We just have to work hard for it to realize that dream. During the last century, as prosperity for so many grew, it seemed that more and more people were realizing that dream. But underneath that prosperity for some was so little for so many. Just how does all of that work together? And now, in our increasingly multicultural world, how is it we make space to be our full selves? Is there space for everyone, for all of our stories? Or does it mean that we each need to give something up to make that happen? All too often, through those stories, there are those divisions that separate us from each other. What's happened, though, is that those divides have more and more seem to keep growing. The divides keep growing due to race and class and gender. What's happening for some is that the American dream maybe isn't so possible like it once was. And in all of that prosperity, we seem to get more and more isolated still from others. Our neighbors seem to get further away than we used to be from them. We want to make sure that we protect what's ours, and we want everything to be just so. Is that thread of individualism part of what contributes to our isolation? If I'm to have what I want, does it somehow come at the expense of someone else? Now, I see some parallels to how we as Unitarian Universalists have told our story too, particularly when it comes from that frame of individualism. Now, certainly on the Unitarian side of our faith, it often begins with that individual note. How many of us, when talking about this faith to someone outside it, begins with that first principle of the inherent worth and dignity of every person? That's where our story begins. We put ourselves at the center of that story. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but with time and our own faith tradition came what we would call the bookend principle, the seventh principle, honoring the interdependent web of existence of which we are a part. And more recently, the eighth principle comes in recognition how we are mutually accountable to take on systems of oppression that would erode that common good. Both of those, I think, ask us to see beyond our individual selves and to how it is we might be part of something larger. Truth is, we live in a world that's changing rapidly. Just think of how quickly information travels these days. Think of how easy it is to manipulate information in all kinds of ways, whether it's a photo of members of the royal family or whatever it is, information that's used to sway and to manipulate voters. When it comes to the planet, it seems as if every season brings some new unprecedented kind of storm or extreme heat or some cold, something that same way things have been are no longer the way they used to be. Telling the story and understanding the story gets more and more nuanced day by day. So much out of there would only further divide us instead of bringing us together. I don't pretend to have all the answers to this. I expect none of us could claim that. What I do know that it is easy for us to reinforce that sense of isolation in our world. The writer David Brooks, who is a columnist for the New York Times, takes this topic on in his latest book called How to Know a Person. How a fundamental step in healing the divisions among us begins with making space to break down some of those barriers that have come to define how it is we are together. Brooks begins with some of his own story of being awkward in the world, of how painfully difficult it was trying to connect with others and witnessing others trying to connect with him. His words now. One day, about 15 years ago, I was at a game in Baltimore when a hitter's bat shattered, and the whole bat, except the knob, helicoptered over the dugout and landed at my feet. I reached down and grabbed it. Getting a bat at a game is 1,000 times better than getting a ball. I should have been jumping up and down, waving my trophy in the air, high-fiving the people around me, becoming a temporary celebrity. Instead, I just placed the bat at my feet and sat, still-faced, as everyone stared at me. Looking back, I want to scream at myself, "Show a little joy!" But when it came to spontaneous shows of emotion, I had the emotional capacity of a head of cabbage. Brooks writes that life does have a way of tenderizing us. He recounts experiences like being a parent, or like suffering failures, including broken relationships, or the general vulnerability of getting older. Those are the experiences that bring us into the world and closer to each other. But Brooks writes that too often our institutions have focused on things like tests and teaching how to build and succeed at our careers, how the focus is what the individual needs, sometimes at the expense of others around them, and certain in times when there is a sense of fear and scarcity, those walls only end up getting higher and higher. Perhaps what is most needed is encouragement to work on those real life skills of how we become more human, how we simply connect with others. This is how Brooks describes it. The real act of, say, building a friendship or creating a community involves performing a series of small, concrete social actions well, disagreeing without poisoning the relationships, revealing vulnerability at the appropriate pace, being a good listener, knowing how to end a conversation gracefully, knowing how to ask for and to offer forgiveness, knowing how to let someone down without breaking their heart, knowing how to sit with someone who is suffering, knowing how to host a gathering when everyone feels embraced, knowing how to see things from another person's point of view. He says these are some of the most important things in life, but the kinds of things that were not necessarily taught in schools. In fact, he says it somehow seems as if we have built a society that gives people little guidance on how to perform those most basic activities in life. We are living in times of great change, times of great turning. Every day does seem to bring some new peril. And how is it that we are asked to live in such times? Perhaps we begin by simply paying attention to our emotions. There can be sadness, there can be despair, there can be fear. There's a lot of times when I just find myself generally anxious. I think that comes from all that's unknown. But underneath all of that, too, can be a hint of opportunity as well. When I look around me and see signs, sometimes, of hope. Mainly, I see signs of hope when I look around and see people here in this community trying to live more gently on the earth. I see people reaching out to their neighbors. I see people going beyond their comfort zones to imagine how the world might be different. I see people trying to relate to wars far, far away from this place where we live. All of that said, I've also come to understand that it's a much deeper shift that we are asked to make in these times. I don't even know all the dimensions of that shift and what it will be. It has to do with how we see ourselves and our lives. I think it has to do with the way we are together. It has to do with the ways we tell and the ways we understand our story. It's a shift to an awareness of our interdependence in ways that we may not have experienced in a long time. It's a shift to the spirit, to a sense of interconnection, of maybe giving up some of the security that we feel like we need, but in the end only makes us feel more and more isolated. A shift that ultimately opens us up to new ways of being and of how we are together. Times of change and disruption can bring chaos, but they can also make a space for that opening, seeing things in ways we perhaps have not been able to see them before. What if the story we come to tell fundamentally is a story about being interdependent? What might that story look like and sound like? Will we see in this time of opportunity to change how we live and how we are together, and will we further isolate and find ourselves and our planet increasingly at ruin? The question is, how do we see ourselves in this story? Will we essentially be consumers in life, receiving what it is we can from the marketplace? Or will we see our actions as so deeply connected to the whole? Will we see our lives as part of that vast web of life? Do we see ourselves as entitled to have whatever it is we want? Or do we see ourselves as creatures mindful of the relationships around us and of the choices we make? We shift from a story of relationships that dominate others and the earth to a story of seeing ourselves as partners and others with the earth, we recognize how each individual is precious and unique, yes, but also how we each bring our unique gifts in service to some greater good. We use our powers not against, but with. From this comes changes in how we make political decisions, how we order our priorities that sacrifice the future for short-term gains. But that fundamental shift is how we see ourselves and our lives connected with everything, how we see our prayers as part of some larger collective, as a prayer for all beings, how our prayers are all part of the prayers of the world. It's easy in these times to feel lost and disconnected. It's easy to wonder how our prayers, how our actions make any difference at all. It's easy to wonder where we give our energy when there are so many things that need our energy. I think part of our job is to be clear about what it is that is most important and to give ourselves over to that place of being, that place of interdependence. Words of the Persian mystic Rumi. Today, like every other day, we wake up empty and frightened. Don't open the door to the study and begin reading. Take down a musical instrument. Let the beauty we love be what we do. There are hundreds of ways to kneel and to kiss the ground. We are asked over and over again to be present with life. We're asked over and over again to make space for the Spirit in our lives. We're asked over and over again to make space for the stranger who might have something to tell us or something to teach us. We're asked to hear what the Spirit might be asking of us in these times. I don't have all the answers. None of us do. But I have the faith that the answers will come, that we will figure it out. And yes, we will make mistakes. And yes, that too is all part of life. That too is part of being human. I know that it has something to do with being present to the despair of these times, to the violence, to the chaos, in the midst of all that comes with that still small voice that says, too, this is the way, this is where we need to go next. No, it won't be easy, and we're likely to find our way, sometimes stumbling, but likely too to find our way. One thing leads to another, which leads to another, and then still another. The story is that we're all connected in ways known and unknown, in ways large and small. The story is that we are precious just as we are, and that a lot of the trappings we pick up aren't really all that helpful. The story is that we are not alone, but connected with something vast and mysterious, something we may see only in fragments. But we live with a kind of faith that those fragments will bring us where we need to be in that larger story of life. So be it. Amen. Let's sing together now. Let's join in singing Draw the Circle Wide.
Draw
go from this service today, always remember that you are part of the story. Remember that you are precious and that you are good. Remember, too, to bring your own light into the world. And remember, too, to take some of that light from the good people around you. This is the day we've been given. Let us rejoice in it and be glad. Go in peace. Practice love. Amen.